In the business of death, the line between customer and commodity is thinner than most care to admit. Welcome to the places where the veil between worlds is measured in formaldehyde and satin lining, where the dead don't always stay that way, and the living don't always leave. 3 funeral homes, each a monument to grief, each harboring secrets darker than their basement embalming rooms. They say funeral directors are the last to let you down, but what happens when they don't let you go at all? Watch if you dare, but remember, in these establishments the viewing hours never truly end, the embalming is never quite complete, and your reservation might be more permanent than you planned. After all, everyone becomes a client eventually. The proprietors are waiting. They've been expecting you. The divorce papers weren't even cold when I got the call about Uncle Edmund. I hadn't spoken to him in 15 years, not since that Christmas when he cornered me at the family dinner, reeking of formaldehyde and whiskey, whispering that he could see the death in people, that he knew when they'd go and how, that he could sometimes help with the transition. I was 19 then, old enough to know he was disturbed, young enough to be terrified. Yet here I was, driving through the Michigan wilderness, my Honda's headlights cutting through the October fog, heading to claim the inheritance nobody else wanted. Edmund Durbin's Victorian funeral home in a town I'd never visited called Whitehaven. "It's worth money, Lana," my lawyer had said. "Fix it up, flip it, start over. God knows you need something after what Ryan took." Ryan, my ex. The bastard who'd cheated with his dental hygienist while I spent my days making corpses presentable for their final goodbyes. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become a mortician like Uncle Edmund. Different paths, same destination, hands deep in death. The GPS lost signal 20 minutes before I arrived. I navigated by the crude map the town clerk had faxed. Yes, faxed to my lawyer. When the Victorian silhouette finally loomed from the mist, I almost drove past. The place was barely holding together, a 3-story monstrosity with sagging gables and broken windows that looked like gouged out eyes. "Home sweet fucking home," I muttered, killing the engine. It was nearly midnight. The caretaker, a man named Gus who'd worked with Edmund for 30 years, had left the key under a ceramic frog by the service entrance. The note attached was written in spidery handwriting and read, "Welcome, Miss Durbin. I'll be by tomorrow. Don't go in the basement." I should have listened. That first night I slept in my car. The inside of the funeral home smelled of mildew, chemical preservatives, and something else, like meat gone bad. I told myself it was just neglect. Uncle Edmund had been dead for 2 weeks before anyone found him. Heart attack, they said. Died at his embalming table. In the gray morning light, the funeral home looked worse. Peeling paint, rotting porch boards, a roof that probably leaked in 100 places. But the structure was solid Victorian craftsmanship beneath the decay. I'd worked with enough dead things to know what could be salvaged. Gus arrived at 10, a rail-thin man with nicotine-stained fingers and eyes that never quite met mine. "Your uncle was a good man," he said, lighting a cigarette despite the oxygen tank he wheeled behind him. "Misunderstood in town, but a good man." "I barely knew him," I replied, watching as he unlocked cabinets and showed me where supplies were kept. "But I know funeral homes. I can get this place ready to sell." "Sell?" His roomy eyes widened. "Miss Durbin, this place isn't... It's not like other funeral homes. Formaldehyde is formaldehyde. Death is death." He took a long drag. "You haven't been downstairs yet." "No, your note said..." "I know what I wrote, but you'll go down there eventually. Everyone does. Just, when you do, remember they're only tools of the trade. Nothing more." He left after showing me the accounts. The business had been failing for years. The town used the new funeral parlor on the other side of Whitehaven now. Edmund had been living off savings. The only recent income came from what Gus called special clients. I spent that day cleaning the main floor, hoping some soap and bleach might cover up the years of neglect. Around dusk, I finally went to the basement door. It was locked with 3 deadbolts. Curious, I got the keys from Edmund's office. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase. The light switch at the top illuminated a single bulb that cast more shadows than light. The basement was dry at least, with concrete floors and brick walls. Shelves lined every surface, filled with jars of chemicals, preservation fluids, and tools of the embalming trade. But it was the back wall that made my breath catch. Rows and rows of shelves, each one holding a disembodied head. Not real heads, wax or some similar material. Mannequin heads, like those used for cosmetic practice. Each one was incredibly detailed, down to eyelashes, laugh lines, and individual strands of hair. Each wore a small paper tag hanging from the ear. Names, dates. I picked one up. Dorothy Milligan, June 15, 2018. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The face had character, laughter lines around the mouth, a slight asymmetry to the nose as if it had once been broken, and a small mole above the lip. This wasn't just practice work, this was art. I counted 47 heads in total, all different ages, genders, and ethnicities, all bearing that same uncanny resemblance to a real person who had once lived and breathed. Just props, I said aloud, my voice echoing in the basement. Creepy, but just props. As I turned to leave, I noticed a desk in the corner with an open ledger. Edmund's handwriting was similar to Gus's, spidery and difficult to read, but the headings were clear enough. Name, date of transition, anchor status, binding agent, and payment received. Dorothy Milligan's name was in the ledger. So were all the others from the shelves. The last entry, dated 2 weeks before Edmund died, was incomplete. Under name, he'd written, Lana Durbin. My hands trembled as I slammed the book shut. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house made me start. Every shadow seemed to move. I told myself it was just the stress of the divorce, the strangeness of inheriting a funeral home from a man I'd deliberately avoided most of my life. The next morning, I drove into town for coffee and Wi-Fi. Whitehaven was small, one main street with shops that had seen better days, an old movie theater converted to a church, and a diner called Maggie's that seemed to be the town's beating heart. I opened my laptop and started searching obituaries from the Whitehaven Gazette. If Edmund had been making practice heads based on real clients, I wanted to see how accurate they were. Dorothy Milligan had died on June 12, 2018, 3 days before the date on her tag. Natural causes. She was survived by 2 children and 5 grandchildren. The photo accompanying her obituary showed a stern-faced woman with permed gray hair. I frowned. The mannequin's head looked nothing like this woman. The Dorothy head had straight white hair cut in a bob and a narrower face. I searched for another name from the shelves. Harold Cooper, November 3, 2019. His obituary showed a balding man with a round face and double chin, but the mannequin in the basement had a full head of hair and sharp features. One by one, I searched for more names. None of the obituary photos matched the heads in the basement. Until I refreshed the page, Dorothy Milligan's photo changed. Now it showed exactly the face I'd seen on the mannequin head. Same straight white bob, same asymmetrical nose, same mole above the lip. I blinked hard, refreshed again. The new photo remained. My coffee went cold as I checked the other obituaries I'd found. Harold Cooper's changed too. So had the others, all now showing faces identical to the mannequin heads in Edmund's basement. "You're Edmund's niece, aren't you?" I jumped. A woman in her 60s stood beside my table, coffee pot in hand. "I'm Maggie. Owned this place 30 years. She gestured at my laptop. "Researching the family business?" My mouth went dry. "Just getting to know the town." She topped off my cup. "Your uncle was an institution here. Old-fashioned, but people respected him. Until the troubles." "What troubles?" "About 7 years back, there were accusations. Missing keepsakes from the deceased. Strange noises during viewings. People said they heard voices." I thought of the heads in the basement. What kind of voices? Their loved ones. The ones in the caskets. She lowered her voice. Patty Wilson swore her husband Frank asked her for a cigarette during his funeral. Frank was a 2-pack-a-day man before the emphysema got him. That's impossible. Course it is. Grief makes people imagine things. She tapped my laptop screen, where Harold Cooper's transformed face stared back. Still, there's something about how Edmund prepared them. Made them look more alive than they had in years. Some folks found it comforting. Others said it wasn't right, that the dead should look dead, not like they might sit up and ask for breakfast. Maggie straightened. Anyway, you thinking of reopening? No, just fixing it to sell. She nodded. Probably for the best. The town's mostly switched to hillside funeral services now. More modern approach. As she walked away, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I sent it to voicemail and returned to my disturbing discovery. When the phone immediately rang again, I answered with an irritated, "Hello?" Static crackled. Then a voice, distorted, distant, but unmistakably human, whispered, "Miss Durbin? It's Dorothy. Dorothy Milligan. I think I'm stuck." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. The voicemail was still there when I checked later. The voice garbled, but the message clear. "Miss Durbin, please. Your uncle promised he'd help us cross, but something's wrong. We're trapped. I can feel worms." I deleted it, my hands shaking. 3 more unknown calls came that afternoon. I didn't answer. Back at the funeral home, I found Gus in the embalming room organizing supplies. "What did my uncle do here?" I demanded, showing him the changed obituary photos. "What the hell are those heads in the basement?" Gus's oxygen tank hissed as he took a labored breath. "Anchors," he said finally. "That's what Edmund called them." "Anchors for what?" "For them, the ones who weren't ready." He gestured vaguely at the ceiling, the walls. "The ones who needed more time." I grabbed his bony shoulder. "Explain now." "Some people die before they're ready, Miss Durbin. They have unfinished business, regrets. In the old days, we'd just send them on, ready or not." His yellowed fingers trembled as he lit another cigarette. "Your uncle found another way, a temporary solution. Those mannequin heads, they're not mannequins, they're soul anchors. Wax mixed with personal effects, hair, nail clippings, sometimes a tooth if it could be spared. Gives the departed something to hold on to in this world while they settle their affairs." I laughed incredulously. "You expect me to believe my uncle was, what, trapping souls in wax heads?" "Not trapping, helping. It was temporary, a few months at most. Just until they were ready to cross over properly." "That's insane." "Is it? You're a mortician. You prepare the dead. Your uncle just gave them a little more time to prepare themselves." I thought of the changed obituary photos and the voicemails from the dead. If this were somehow true, why are they calling me? Why now? Gus looked away. "Because Edmund died before he could release them. The anchors are degrading, and the souls, they're getting desperate." That night, the scratching started. Soft at first, like mice in the walls. Then louder, more deliberate. Scratching turned to thumping. Thumping to pounding. It came from everywhere. The floors, the ceiling, the walls. I tried to drown it out with music, with TV, with whiskey. Nothing worked. Around 3 a.m. I went to the bathroom. The mirror was fogged, though the house was cold. As I watched, a handprint appeared in the condensation. A perfect impression of a small hand. Then another, and another, until the mirror was covered in handprints of all sizes. The chemical smell was unmistakable. Formaldehyde. My phone rang, another unknown number. "Leave me alone," I shouted at the empty house. "You're not real." The call went to voicemail. I listened, holding my breath. "Lana, it's Ryan." My ex-husband's voice, but Ryan wasn't dead. I'd spoken to him last week about the divorce settlement. "I need to tell you something," his voice continued. "That night when we fought, I didn't mean to push you so hard. I didn't think you'd fall like that. Hit your head. There was so much blood." I threw the phone against the wall. When the morning came, I was huddled in my car again, my eyes red from not sleeping. I drove straight to Maggie's, ordered coffee, and pulled out my laptop. The obituaries had changed again. Now all the photos were blurry and distorted, the faces melting like wax near a flame. My hands shook as I searched for a new term. Lana Durbin. There were no results. I tried Ryan Durbin instead, and there it was, dated 3 months ago. My ex-husband's obituary. Cause of death, suicide. The article mentioned guilt over his wife's accidental death. My coffee cup slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor. "You all right, honey?" Maggie asked, hurrying over with a towel. I couldn't speak. My head throbbed where I must have hit it falling, but that was impossible. I was here. I was alive. Wasn't I? I drove straight back to the funeral home and flew down to the basement. The shelves with the heads seemed to have multiplied overnight. More faces, more names, more dates. I searched frantically until I found it, a head that looked exactly like me, perfect down to the tiny scar on my left eyebrow from a childhood fall. The tag read, Lana Durbin, September 30th, 2023. 2 weeks before Edmund died. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I grabbed the wax head and ran upstairs to the kitchen, found a heavy cast iron pan and raised it high. "This isn't real," I said. "None of this is real." I brought the pan down with all my strength. The wax head cracked, split, shattered. For one breath-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then my throat closed. I clawed at my neck, attempting to scream, but no sound emerged. My vocal cords were gone. In the window's reflection, I watched in horror as my skin grayed, sagging, sloughing off in tiny pieces. My phone rang one final time. I answered with trembling fingers. "Miss Durbin." Uncle Edmund's voice was tired but kind. "I'm so sorry. I tried to warn you, but there wasn't time. The accident with Ryan, it was bad. By the time they brought you to me, there was so little to work with." I tried to speak. Nothing came out. "The anchor was only temporary," he continued, "just until I could properly prepare you for transition. But my heart, well, best laid plans." The skin on my hands peeled away, revealing blackened tissue underneath. "I left you the funeral home hoping you'd understand what needed to be done. The others, they're waiting too. Their anchors are failing without maintenance." I sank to the floor, watching my body decay in real time. "We're family, Lana. In this business, in this life, and the next. I'll see you soon." The line went dead. Outside, cars pulled into the driveway. Dozens of them. Familiar faces pressed against the windows. Dorothy Milligan, Harold Cooper, all the others from the basement. Their features melting, reforming, melting again. They'd come for what was theirs. I crawled toward the basement door. If I could reach the other anchors and destroy them all at once, maybe we could all cross over together. But my legs weren't working anymore. My fingers left smears of blackened tissue on the hardwood floors. The pounding on the front door grew louder. In my last moments of consciousness, I realized the truth. I wasn't the mortician anymore. I was now the client, and I hadn't been ready. I never wanted to work in a funeral home, but after Ellen died, I didn't want much of anything except the burn of whiskey and the oblivion that followed. 6 months of that was enough to lose my contracting business and nearly my life. The rehab counselor said I needed structure, routine, and minimal stress, something to rebuild around. That's how I ended up taking the night shift at Price & Sons, a recently reopened funeral home in Clarksdale, Mississippi. "Perfect for recovery," Dr. Jenkins said when I told him about the job. "Quiet, contemplative, no temptations." He wasn't wrong about the quiet part. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The old Victorian mansion sat on 3 acres at the edge of town, surrounded by ancient oaks draped with Spanish moss. Most nights I'd go hours without hearing anything but the hum of the refrigeration units and the occasional creak of the building settling. My duties were simple: monitor the premises, prepare the facilities for next-day services, and occasionally receive new guests from hospitals, or the medical examiner. Minimal contact with the living. Perfect for a recovering alcoholic with fresh grief. The first month passed without incident. I spent my time reading recovery literature and fixing things around the building that the day staff overlooked. The work kept my hands busy and my mind quiet. I was even sleeping better during daylight hours. Then came the night of October 17th. I was doing my midnight rounds when I noticed something off in preparation room B. Mrs. Donaldson, an elderly woman who'd passed from heart failure, wasn't positioned exactly as I'd left her. The sheet covering her body was slightly askew, and her head appeared to be turned about 15 degrees to the right. I chalked it up to faulty memory. When you're still adjusting to sobriety, you question everything, especially your recollections. 2 nights later, it happened again, this time with Mr. Peterson in room A. His arm had shifted from his side to rest across his chest. I reviewed the security logs. Nobody had entered either room. I was the only one on the premises. I mentioned it to the day manager, Frank Ward, a stout man in his 50s who'd been in the funeral business his entire adult life. "Old buildings settle," he said dismissively. "Creates vibrations. Bodies shift. Nothing to worry about." I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. Still, I let it go. I needed this job. A week later, I noticed something else strange. Frost patterns on the inside of the windows in the north corridor. Not random crystalline formations, but deliberate lines that resembled symbols, circles within triangles, strange angular letters that reminded me of something between Hebrew and Sanskrit. It was late October in Mississippi. While nights could get cool, frost inside was unusual. I took pictures with my phone and adjusted the thermostat. The symbols were gone by morning. Frank told me to check the seals around the windows and said maintenance would look into it. They never did. The night of November 3rd changed everything. I was in the security office reviewing camera feeds when I noticed movement on monitor 4, which covered the main preparation room. It was 2:13 a.m. according to the timestamp. A woman stood by the embalming table, tall, thin, dressed in what looked like outdated nurse's attire, a crisp white uniform with a small cap. Her back was to the camera. I grabbed the radio and announced my presence throughout the building. Then I ran to the preparation room, my heart hammering in my chest. Empty. Just the body of a middle-aged man who'd been prepped for viewing the next day. Nothing out of place. Back in the security office, I rewound the footage. There she was, standing motionless for exactly 4 minutes, from 2:13 to 2:17 a.m. Then she turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of her face. Her eyes were completely white. No iris, no pupil, just milky white orbs in a gaunt face. She looked directly at the camera, then vanished. Not walked away, vanished. One frame she was there, the next she wasn't. I slammed my palm against the desk. I was seeing things. The stress, the grief, the isolation of the night shift. It was all getting to me. But I hadn't had a drink in 4 months. This wasn't DTs or some kind of flashback. I spent the rest of my shift reviewing other camera feeds, checking all the preparation rooms, and double-locking doors. Nothing else unusual happened, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. The next night I came prepared. I brought printed screenshots of the woman and the frost symbols. I also brought a digital recorder and an electromagnetic field detector I'd ordered online. Ellen would have laughed at me, her rational, no-nonsense husband chasing ghosts. I set up additional cameras in the preparation room and waited. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the temperature dropped dramatically. My breath fogged in front of my face. The EMF detector went crazy, its lights flashing red. And there she was again on the monitor, same position, same outfit. This time she was writing something on the wall with her finger, leaving frost patterns behind. I ran to the room, determined to confront whatever this was. The door was ice cold to the touch. I threw it open and found nothing but an empty room, the body undisturbed. But on the wall was fresh frost in the shape of 3 words, "Below. He waits." My hands shook as I took pictures. When I returned to the security office, the woman was gone from the feed. The timestamp read 2:18 a.m. That night, I did something I hadn't done since taking the job. I explored the building beyond my assigned areas. Price and Sons had been built in 1949, a grand statement of post-war prosperity by its founder, Archibald Price. The mansion had 3 floors above ground and a basement that housed the mechanicals and storage. But as I studied the building's blueprint in the office, something felt off about the dimensions. The basement didn't extend under the entire footprint of the building as it should have. I took a flashlight and went down to investigate. The basement was a maze of storage rooms, filing cabinets, and machinery. At the far end was a supply closet filled with old embalming chemicals and equipment. I moved aside some shelving and found what I was looking for, a seam in the wall that didn't belong. It took some doing, but I found the mechanism that released it, a small lever disguised as a pipe fitting. The wall slid open with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I should have waited until daylight. I should have called Frank or the police. But something pulled me forward, down those stairs into the stale, chemical-laden air below. The sub-basement was a single room, much older than the rest of the building. The walls were rough-hewn stone, and the floor was dirt-packed hard by decades of footsteps. In the center stood an ancient embalming table, the kind used before modern regulations came into effect. The room was empty of bodies, but not of evidence. Faded photographs hung on the walls, grisly images of dissection and organ removal. Ledgers stacked on a small desk contained names, dates, and amounts. Most disturbing were the jars, dozens of them containing preserved human organs. I picked up one of the ledgers dated 1951 to 1954. It detailed the sale of organs harvested from the bodies of black citizens, hearts, kidneys, livers, all sold to medical schools and private researchers. Every entry was initialed AP, Archibald Price. I found more logbooks, each containing similar records spanning from 1951 to 1968. The last entry was dated June 11th, 1968, the day the funeral home had temporarily closed, following what newspaper articles had called health code violations. But what truly chilled me were the night logs kept by previous overnight workers. 7 different employees between 1951 and 1968 had reported similar phenomena: moving bodies, strange symbols, and a white-eyed woman appearing at specific times. Each of these employees had disappeared during their shifts, with no trace ever found. Their replacements had all quit within weeks, citing extreme psychological distress. One had been found catatonic, staring at the security monitors and repeating, "He feeds on pain." As I flipped through the pages, a newspaper clipping fell out. It detailed the strange deaths of 3 funeral home employees, all involved in the organ trafficking operation. One died in a freak embalming machine accident, another drowned in a vat of formaldehyde, and the third was found exsanguinated with no obvious wounds. Archibald Price, however, had simply vanished. The article speculated that he had fled to avoid prosecution, but no trace of him was ever found. I was so engrossed in the records that I didn't notice the temperature dropping until my breath clouded in front of my face. It was 2:13 a.m. The white-eyed woman stood in the corner of the room watching me. Up close, her features were more distinct: high cheekbones, dark skin, full lips frozen in a grimace of pain. Her uniform badge read, "Luella Wilson, head nurse." I couldn't move as she approached, her footsteps making no sound on the dirt floor. She raised a spectral hand and pointed to the far wall, which I hadn't yet explored. "He took what wasn't his," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping concrete. "From my people, from me. He wouldn't let go, wouldn't pass on, still takes, still feeds." She vanished, but the wall she'd pointed to shifted. Dirt fell away, revealing a hidden alcove, and within it, something that defied comprehension. A body, suspended in a tank of yellowish fluid. Tubes and wires connected it to ancient machinery that hummed with power. The body was a horror, partly preserved, partly rotted, caught in some impossible state between life and death. The eyes were open, milky white just like the woman's, but aware, conscious. I recognized the face from photographs in the funeral home's lobby. Archibald Price. His mouth didn't move, but his voice filled my head. "You've come to join us, Felix Warner." I stumbled backward, hitting the desk and sending ledgers flying. "What the fuck is this?" Continuity, the voice replied. I found the way to endure, to transcend. Death touches us all, but I refuse its embrace. The machinery hummed louder, and I noticed something I'd missed before. The tubes weren't just connected to Price's suspended body. They extended through the ceiling, up into the preparation rooms where the recently deceased were kept. Pain, grief, trauma. They carry energy, Price continued. The recently dead hold it all, their last moments, their loved one's sorrow. I harvest it. I feed. I persist. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The others, the night shift workers who disappeared. Price's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Necessary. When the harvest runs low, fresh trauma sustains me. Their fear, their pain, their grief for what they lost. Just like my grief for Ellen. I realized with horror that my pain had been feeding this abomination since I'd started working here. You're different, Felix. You understand loss. You've touched the void and returned. Join me. There's room in the machine for two. The machinery groaned and a second tank filled with fluid beside Price's. I saw tubes reaching toward me like tendrils. Ellen waits on the other side, Price whispered. But here, grief can sustain you forever. You need never let her go. For one terrible moment, I considered it. To hold on to my grief for Ellen forever, to never have to move on or forget. Wasn't that what part of me wanted? But then I remembered what my counselor had said. Grief isn't meant to be preserved like a specimen in formaldehyde. It's meant to transform us and then release us. No, I said firmly, this isn't living, this is monstrous. I turned to the machinery, ancient pumps and filtration systems jury-rigged with modern components. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed everything I could reach. Glass shattered, fluid sprayed, electrical sparks flew. Price's mental voice became a scream. Stop! You'll destroy everything. That's the idea, I grunted, continuing my assault on the equipment. As I smashed the final control panel, Price's suspended body convulsed. The fluid in his tank began to boil and change color, turning from yellow to deep crimson. You fool, he hissed. The ritual cannot be interrupted. It must transfer. It must continue. I felt a sudden searing pain throughout my body. The room spun around me. I collapsed to my knees, watching in horror as my hands turned translucent. I could see through them to the dirt floor below. Price's body was dissolving in the tank, breaking down into the fluid as the machinery sputtered and died. But with each piece of him that disappeared, I felt myself becoming less substantial. The cycle continues, were the last words I heard as consciousness slipped away from me. Different vessel. Same hunger. I woke up on the floor of the sub-basement. The tank that had held Price was empty, the fluid drained away. The machinery was destroyed, smoking and sparking. Daylight filtered through a small window near the ceiling. I felt different, lighter somehow. I climbed the stairs back to the main basement and made my way up to the security office. The clock read 7:15 a.m. My shift had ended over an hour ago. Frank was at the desk reviewing footage with a young man I didn't recognize. And this is where you'll monitor the cameras, Frank was saying. Nothing much happens on the night shift, but we need someone here just in case. Frank, I called out, we need to talk about what's down there. Neither of them reacted. Frank, I shouted, reaching for his shoulder. My hand passed right through him. Cold realization washed over me. I looked down at my body, solid to my own eyes but not to theirs. The new employee was settling into my chair. What's that glitch? He asked, pointing to monitor 3, which showed preparation room A. Frank leaned closer. What glitch? There, the new guy said. By the table. Looks like a man standing there, staring at the camera. Frank adjusted his glasses. I don't see anything. But I knew what the new guy was seeing. Me, standing by the embalming table. My new post. I felt a pull toward that room, an irresistible tug to my new station. As I moved through the hallway, passing through solid doors, I realized the truth. I hadn't destroyed the ritual. I'd become part of it. Price was gone, but something of him remained. In me, in the building, in the space between life and death. I took my position beside the body on the table, a middle-aged woman whose family was consumed by grief. I could feel their pain like a tangible thing, flowing into the building, into me. It was 2:13 a.m. My time to appear had come. I turned to look directly into the camera, my eyes now as white as Luella's had been. The hunger was excruciating. I'd never needed a drink as badly as I now needed this energy, this essence of human suffering. And I understood what Price had meant. The cycle continues. Different vessel. Same hunger. The new night attendant would see me. He would investigate. He would find the sub-basement, even with the machinery destroyed. He would learn the truth, just as I had. And in time, he would join us. The grief I'd carried for Ellen seemed distant now, replaced by this new, terrible hunger. I wondered if she could see what I'd become, if she was watching from whatever true afterlife existed beyond this half-existence I now inhabited. "I'm sorry," I whispered to no one and everyone. But the sorrow wasn't for what I'd lost. It was for what I'd become, and for what would happen to the next person who took the night shift at Price & Sons funeral home. I never wanted to run a funeral home. Not exactly a little girl's dream job, right? But in Craven Falls, Massachusetts, the Ainsworth Funeral Home has been in my family for 4 generations. When Dad's Parkinson's got too bad, there wasn't much choice. It was either take over or watch a century of family history dissolve. So at 35, I, Celeste Ainsworth, became the town's first female funeral director. Most days I'm fine with it. The dead don't judge, don't complain. The living is another matter entirely. The first time I noticed something off was with old Mrs. Patterson. A heart attack took her on a Tuesday. By Thursday evening's viewing, the skin around her eyes had darkened. Not the typical discoloration you get with death. This was different. Looked almost like bruising. Her fingertips, too. Blackened, as if frostbitten. I'd prepared her myself, every step by the book. The embalming was perfect. I'd stake my reputation on it. "You see anything strange about Mrs. Patterson?" I asked my assistant Devin as we closed up that night. He glanced at the body and shrugged. "Looks normal to me, why?" I pointed to the darkening skin. "That shouldn't be happening, not after proper embalming." "Just decomp, boss. Sometimes it moves faster. Not this fast and not like this." Devin dismissed it as one of those things. A fluke. But when it happened again with Mr. Jurgen the following week, same symptoms, same room, I started keeping notes. Everybody laid out in viewing room B showed accelerated decomposition, especially around the eyes and fingertips, like something was trying to get in through one, out through the other. None of the bodies in room A had these issues. After the third incident, I started checking our chemicals, ventilation systems, and even the lighting. Nothing explained it. Then Mrs. Garrison's son called 6 weeks after her burial, his voice shaking. "We're moving her to the family plot in Vermont," he said. "Had to exhume her this morning." "I'm sorry for the additional distress," I said automatically. "There's something you need to see," he said. "Something wrong." An hour later, I stood in our preparation room, staring down at Mrs. Garrison's reopened casket. The satin lining was torn to shreds around her hands, deep gouges in the wood underneath. Bloody scratch marks. I'd seen enough cadavers to know these marks were made after embalming, after burial. "This isn't possible," I whispered. "Are you saying my mother was buried alive?" Mr. Garrison's voice cracked. "No, absolutely not. I was certain of that much. Your mother was deceased. I verified it myself. The county coroner signed off. What I didn't say, this was the third exhumation with the same findings, all from viewing room B. I started staying late, watching the room after hours. Nothing for 3 nights. Then, on the 4th night, a night when room B was empty between services, I heard it. Crying. Soft, muffled crying. Coming from behind the closed door. I'm not a coward, but something about that sound froze my blood. Pure animal instinct told me not to open that door. Instead, I pulled up the security feed on my computer. The room looked empty on screen, rows of vacant chairs facing an empty display table. But the crying continued. I cranked up the volume and recorded it, played it back immediately. Nothing. No sound on the recording. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if 80-hour work weeks were finally breaking me. That's when I saw it. Movement on the screen. A figure walking slowly between the rows of chairs. Tall, too tall. Dressed in black funeral attire from another era. Long, thin arms hung nearly to its knees. Its face, I could never quite see its face. The camera angle would shift, or a shadow would fall, but it always remained obscured. I checked the room's entry log. No one had badged in. The next day, I reviewed the tapes from previous services in Room B. There he was, at every single viewing. Walking between guests, standing beside caskets, bending low over the faces of the dead. No one ever seemed to notice. Not the mourners, not my staff. Just this figure, methodically checking each body. I took the footage to Devin, my hands shaking. "I don't see anyone," he said, squinting at the screen. "Right there, between the third and fourth rows, moving toward the front." Devin looked at me like I was losing it. "There's nothing there, Celeste." I knew what I'd seen. I also knew how it sounded. So I did what any rational person would do. I hit the town archives. Craven Falls is old, dating back to the 1700s. Every small town has its secrets, its legends. I just needed to find the right one. 3 days of searching through microfiche and dusty records led me to a series of newspaper articles from 1896. A typhoid outbreak had swept through town, killing dozens. The obituaries listed a gravedigger among the dead, Jonah Bell, age 42. But it was a follow-up article that made my skin crawl. Dated 3 weeks after Bell's funeral. Grisly discovery at Oakwood Cemetery. Groundskeeper Richards reports disturbing findings upon relocation of recent typhoid victims. Evidence suggests gravedigger Bell may have revived after burial. The interior of the casket showed significant damage from attempted escape. County physician suggests Bell survived up to 3 days in his coffin before expiring. Most disturbing, the deceased appears to have severed his tongue, likely in desperation or delirium. Cause of death determined to be asphyxiation on blood. I felt sick reading it. The thought of waking up, trapped, clawing at the lid until your fingers bled, biting through your own tongue. The town librarian caught me staring at the article. "Ah, you found old Jonah," she said quietly. My head snapped up. "You know this story." She nodded. "Every kid in Craven Falls learns about the Watchman, sooner or later." She leaned closer. "They say he still checks the dead at funerals, making sure no one gets buried alive like he was." The Watchman. That's what we called him growing up. The story goes that if you see him at a funeral, it means the person isn't dead. He's looking for signs of life that the doctors miss. She smiled thinly. Just an old ghost story. However, they did find those caskets torn up from the inside back then. Medical science wasn't what it is now. I didn't mention the 3 modern caskets with similar damage. That night, I set up my own equipment in Room B. Extra cameras, motion sensors, the works. In the center, laid out on display, was Walter Green. Dead 3 days. Heart attack, like most of them. I'd done the embalming myself, verifying every step. Around 2 a.m., the motion sensors tripped. I sprinted from my office to the security monitors. The footage showed the door opening, a figure entering. It was me. I watched in horror as I, or something wearing my face, walked trance-like to the display, climbed onto the table beside Walter Green, laid down, closed my eyes. But I was sitting in my office, watching this happen. I pinched myself and slapped my cheek, fully awake. On screen, my doppelganger laid motionless. Then its eyes snapped open, staring directly at the camera. The eyes were solid black, like empty sockets. Its mouth opened wider than humanly possible, revealing a gaping darkness where a tongue should be. The feed cut to static. I ran to room B, my heart pounding. The door was locked from inside. I fumbled with my key and finally got it open. The room was empty. Walter Green lay alone, undisturbed. I checked the cameras again. Nothing. No footage of anything I'd just seen. Like it had been wiped clean. I must have fallen asleep at my desk. That was the only explanation. Stress and exhaustion create nightmares. I decided to go home and get some real sleep, come back fresh in the morning. As I gathered my things, Devin texted, "Coming in early. The family wants to check the setup for green service." I texted back, "Everything's ready, going home to crash." His reply came immediately, "Too late, already here, and Celeste. Why is there a body in room B that's not on the schedule?" My blood went cold. "Green is in room B." "Green is in the prep room, you moved him yesterday." I hadn't. "Then who's in room B?" I typed with trembling fingers. His response, "You are." I ran. Sprinted through the halls, skidding to a stop at room B's doorway. Devin stood there, face ash white, staring at the display table. A body lay there in my black suit, my face, my hair, even the small butterfly tattoo on my wrist. But I was standing in the doorway watching. "Devin," I whispered, "that's not me." He turned and looked straight through me like I wasn't there, pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "There's been an accident," he said, his voice cracking. "My boss. I think she's dead." I screamed at him, waved my hands in front of his face. Nothing. I grabbed his shoulder and my hand passed through him like smoke. Panic rising, I spun around. I caught my reflection in the decorative mirror on the wall. Except it wasn't my reflection. It was Jonah Bell, that same tall figure in black, face still obscured. He raised one long-fingered hand and pressed it against the glass from his side. I stumbled back and fell against the display table, through it, through my own body lying there. The figure in the mirror tilted his head, and for the first time, I glimpsed his face, hollow-eyed, mouth a ruined cavity, but somehow I felt no fear, only a terrible understanding. He wasn't killing them, he was checking, making sure they were truly dead before burial, making sure no one suffered his fate. But me? I wasn't dead. At least I didn't think I was. My confusion must have shown because the figure, Jonah, pointed to my corpse on the table, then back to me. Slowly, he pantomimed sleeping, then waking. "I was sleepwalking?" I asked. He shook his head. "Dreaming?" Another shake. Then I understood. "I was checking them too, like you." A slow nod. "But how? When?" He pressed his hand against the glass again, beckoning. I hesitated. Behind me I heard sirens, Devin's voice explaining to dispatchers. The corporeal world moving on without me. I stepped toward the mirror and placed my palm against his. The glass turned to water beneath my touch, cold, pulling me forward. On the other side stood not just Jonah, but others. Dozens. All in funeral clothes from different eras. All with the same hollow eyes and the same purpose. "We've been waiting for you, Celeste," said a woman in a Victorian mourning dress. "You've been one of us for months now." "I don't understand," I said. "I'm alive. I run the funeral home." "You run the funeral home," Jonah spoke, his voice like gravel. "But you died 74 days ago. Aneurysm, in your sleep." "That's not possible. I've been working, talking to people." "Between sunset and sunrise only," the woman corrected. "Never noticed how clients stop scheduling morning appointments? How Devin handles all the daytime viewings?" A cold realization washed over me. It was true. I couldn't remember a single morning meeting or a single daylight service in months. "Your body was never found," Jonah continued. "You kept showing up for work each night, not realizing." "Then whose body is that?" I pointed back through the mirror where paramedics now surrounded my apparent corpse. "A vessel," the Victorian woman explained. "Empty. Until tonight, when you finally saw yourself on the security footage. That awareness pulled you fully across the threshold." I felt sick. So I've been, what? A ghost? A watcher, Jonah corrected. Like us, we check the living for death. You check the dead for life. I thought about the bodies in room B, the blackened eyes and fingertips. Me, unconsciously checking them, making sure they were truly dead. Making sure no one suffered Jonah's fate. The ones that were exhumed, I said slowly. The ones with scratch marks would have been buried alive, the Victorian woman nodded. You marked them, flagged them for the living to notice. But I don't remember doing any of it. You will, Jonah said. In time. For now, you have a choice. He gestured to the mirror, where I could still see room B, my funeral home, my life. You can go back, haunt that place as a confused spirit, never understanding, never at peace. Or, he gestured to the dark corridor stretching behind him. You can join us, do the work knowingly. What work? Saving them, he said simply. The misdiagnosed, the prematurely declared, the almost dead. His ruined mouth attempted a smile. I was too late to save myself, but not too late for others. I stared back at the scene in my funeral home. Paramedics loaded my body, the empty vessel, onto a stretcher. Devon answered questions, shocked and grieving. The business my family had run for generations was now without an Ainsworth, but it had been without one for over 2 months. How many, I asked. How many have you saved? Hundreds, the Victorian woman answered. Over the years, across many places. I thought about Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Jurgen, and Mrs. Garrison. How I'd felt something was wrong with them. How I'd apparently been right. If I stay, I said slowly, can I still watch over my funeral home? Jonah nodded. It's easier when we have a connection to a place, a purpose. I took one last look through the mirror. At Devon, at the business, at my old life. Then I turned back to Jonah and the others. Show me how, I said. He gestured down the dark corridor. We have much to teach you. About the signs, about moving between worlds. I followed them deeper, away from the mirror until room B faded from view. I had questions, thousands of them, but also a strange certainty that I was where I belonged. That night, Devon slept fitfully, grieving his boss and friend. He didn't see the tall figure that entered his room, bent low over his face, checking his breathing, his pulse, making sure death was nowhere near him. He didn't see me standing in the corner watching, learning. By morning, rumors had already started spreading through Craven Falls. About the funeral director found dead in her viewing room. About strange marks on bodies that had passed through room B. A new legend was born, and I was part of it now. When you come to a viewing at Ainsworth Funeral Home, pay attention to the mirrors. Sometimes, if you look at just the right moment, you might catch a glimpse of me. Checking, watching, making sure. Because these days I have a new job, making sure the dead are really dead, and the living stay that way.